Today, we're diving into a really tough and often misunderstood condition, frontotemporal degeneration, or FTD. For the families who go through this, the journey usually doesn't start with memory loss. Nope, it starts with a deeply unsettling question.
So, just imagine this. The person you love, someone you know inside and out, their personality just starts to shift. You know? Someone who is always kind of reserved suddenly becomes impulsive. A person who is warm and caring now seems distant, almost cold. For so many families, this is the confusing, heartbreaking reality that marks the start of their journey with FTD.
And this one question, what is happening? It can just consume a family, sometimes for years. You start to wonder, is it depression, a midlife crisis, maybe just a ton of stress? And all the while, you feel like the person you love is just slipping away. The search for an answer can be a long and incredibly isolating road.
But here's the thing, the answer isn't psychological. It is a physical disease of the brain. So what exactly is FTD? Let's break it down.
Okay, so FTD is a form of dementia, but you kind of have to throw out what you probably think of when you hear that word. Because this isn't about memory loss, at least not at first. It's about the gradual breakdown of the very parts of the brain that control who we are, our personality. To really get it, we've got to look at these two specific areas. The frontal lobe, think of it as the brain's CEO. It manages your personality, your ability to plan, your social behavior. Then you have the temporal lobe, which handles language and emotion. In FTD, these areas literally begin to shrink, and that is the direct cause of all the baffling symptoms that families are witnessing.
Now, because it focuses so much on personality and language, FTD gets misdiagnosed as Alzheimer's all the time. But listen, they are very, very different diseases, and understanding these differences is absolutely critical for both families and for doctors. And the differences are, well, they're stark. First off, the age it starts. FTD typically hits people much younger, usually between 45 and 65. The initial symptoms are these jarring changes in personality or language. It's not the memory loss that usually defines early Alzheimer's. With FTD, significant memory problems often don't show up until much, much later in the disease.
And that timing is everything. This is not a disease of old age. It hits people right in the prime of their lives. We're talking during their careers, while they're still raising children, and that, as you can imagine, creates a profound and totally unique set of challenges for their families.
So, to understand this a bit better, let's zoom in on the most common subtype. It's called Behavioral Variant FTD, or BVFTD for short. This is where those core personality changes really take center stage.
One of the earliest and honestly most heartbreaking signs is a loss of empathy. It's like the person just doesn't seem to care about the feelings of other people anymore. That internal filter that we all have that governs our social behavior, it just disappears.
So, what does that actually look like? Well, it might be making a shockingly inappropriate comment in public, or showing complete indifference to a huge family event, like the birth of a grandchild. And the toughest part is, they're often totally unaware that their behavior is hurtful or strange.
At the very same time, you might see this really strange paradox, a complete loss of interest in everything, which is called apathy, coupled with these new, sometimes bizarre, compulsive behaviors. For instance, a once-driven executive might lose all interest in their job. Someone might start hoarding, or repeat the same phrase over and over, or walk the exact same route every single day. It is so vital to remember these are not choices. They are symptoms of a brain that is physically changing.
Now, because these symptoms look so much like psychiatric issues, the road to getting an actual diagnosis is, well, it's often incredibly long and just filled with frustrating wrong turns.
Get this. On average, it takes 3.6 years to get an accurate FTD diagnosis. That's nearly 4 years of confusion, of frustration, of strained relationships before a family even has a name for what they're fighting.
And look, getting the diagnosis is devastating. There's no cure and there's no treatment to slow it down. But a diagnosis is also a turning point. It provides an explanation. It is that moment when families can stop blaming the person and start figuring out how to manage the disease. It opens the door to getting support.
So this leads to the most difficult question of all. How do you adapt? How do you care for someone when their very personality seems like it's been hijacked by a disease?
This piece of advice from a fellow caregiver is probably the most profound insight you can get. You just can't reason with the disease. arguing or trying to correct them will only lead to more frustration for everyone. The key, the big shift, is that you have to enter their world.
The goal shifts entirely. It's no longer about trying to make them see your reality. It's about making their reality as safe, as calm, and as supportive as it can possibly be.
And there are practical ways to do this. Accept their reality instead of fighting it. Create simple, predictable routines. Use clear, simple sentences. And you've got to modify the environment to keep them safe, whether that means locking the fridge to manage compulsive eating or just securing the home. All of this is incredibly demanding. No one can do it alone, and really, no one should have to. The isolation that caregivers feel can be just as devastating as the disease itself.
But thankfully, there are lifelines. The Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration has a ton of great information, a helpline for immediate advice, and can connect you to local support groups. Reaching out is a sign of strength, not weakness.
So, how can understanding the brain science behind a disease transform our approach from frustration to empathy? It's by understanding that the person is still there, even when their personality seems lost. When we see the baffling behaviors not as choices, but as symptoms of a physical illness, it changes everything. That shift from anger to compassion is the most powerful tool we have in the face of this devastating disease.